We are joined now by Mike Farrell of MikeFarrellSports.com. He's the godfather of recruiting. Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, Mike. I'm pretty excited to grab it. We told our producer, I'm like, gosh, there's so many national stories on the recruiting level. I'm like, let's shoot for, and it just so happens. I said, Shane, that's a great get because Mike you just finished a couple of pieces. The Penn State James Franklin thing we just talked about last week. I want to get to that. But a couple of weeks ago, it was the culture war, right? Colorado, Nebraska, strong opinions. I'm like, bam, let's do this on a Monday morning, man. How you been?
I've been good. I don't do radio anymore, so
yeah.
I just don't. I do full ride radio once a week on Sirius XM with Childers and Newheisel. And then everybody else asks me, and I just don't even respond or don't do it anymore. It's been, 27 years doing this. It just gets tiring. But I've got a fascination with the Nebraska fan base, as you can see by the website, the articles. I've always been fascinated by the fan base, and to the point where I've told them over the years, pump the brakes on this. It's not going to work, like the Calibraska movement, which was, ridiculous and was never going to work. And they hated me and they wanted me dead. But I was right, to the fact that pump the brakes on Scott Frost, he might be over his head. But I believe in Matt Rhule, so it's kind of interesting. That's why I'm writing more Nebraska stuff, because I've followed this guy very extensively throughout my career. And I know he's a very good coach, and I think he's going to do some good things there. So that's why you're going to see more Nebraska content on MikeFarrellSports.com.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I obviously follow you on social media, so I get a chance to kind of watch this unfold real time. And what is it about Coach Rhule that you like? I know for the fan base, it starts with his level of authenticity, right? He's very disarming, and he's a tremendous speaker, but that doesn't always win you games. A lot of times it doesn't win you games. So what is it for you loosely that you gravitate towards?
Well, he's a good guy. He's an everyman. The egotistical, narcissistic head football coach that I deal with 95% of the time. That's not him. It's not like we're buddies or hang out, but I don't know him that well. I mean, I've talked to him here and there. But I know people who have worked under him for many, many years, dating back to Temple. And then obviously the job he did at Baylor. He's a tremendous talent evaluator. He's a straight shooter. He's a developer of players. And all these things are extremely important in Nebraska, because you're not going to get 4- and 5-star kids to come to Lincoln. You're going to have to coach them up. You're going to have to turn the 3 into a 4 or the 3 into a 5. You'll get your 4 and 5 here and there. Those guys got to be hits. He can recruit anywhere, and he, coaches kids up. He's an inspirational type of guy. That's why, he took the bag in the NFL, and nobody blames him for that. And that, let's just be honest. I mean, if you're offered $80 million guaranteed money, yeah, you're going to take it. But that's not his fit. It's not where he belongs, because you're not able to pick and choose as much as you want through free agency as you are through recruiting. You're not able to pick your own team through the draft. It's a slower build. And it's hard to find, those diamonds in the rough. As recruiting, there's so many kids, you can go out and find them. So that's kind of why I think, his second year at most places, well, at Temple and Baylor, of course, have been vast improvements, and he's walked into some dumpster fires. And I think, you'll see a vast improvement here, but I'm pumping the brakes. I see a lot of Nebraska fans saying, oh my gosh, this is the year, 10-2. Listen, you haven't gone to a bowl in a very long time. Last year finished with a dud. You had a losing record. Let's be happy with 7-5. Let's be happy moving forward. I see this first 7 games of the schedule. I see every Nebraska fan saying we're going 7-0. That's not going to happen. That's not life. That's not what you're going to get tripped up. 8-4, 7-5 would be amazing for this fan base, and I think that's what we can look at, as a goal for Matt Rhule in year 2.
How much of what you were talking about, Mike? Obviously he's recruited my son, and I said early on, one of the reasons why I felt comfortable with him is if something ever happened to me, I like how he's invested in young people holistically, right? And you talked about his talent evaluation. How much of that has to do with the fact that he has this unique ability, it seems, to care about the whole person, which in turn leaves guys really trusting in what he says from a development standpoint. How much of those things do you think go hand in hand?
I think it's coupled with, honesty. There's a lot of coaches out there that will make you feel important, that will invest their time into, okay, so this is his cousin that's like his brother. This is his uncle who's very involved in the process. This is going to come down to what mom wants versus what dad wants. All those things, you have to do your research in college football recruiting on the family dynamic and who's most important in the kid's life. But you also do that with a touch of honesty. I know of, situations from former staffers of his where they've actually been honest and said, listen, I know, your uncle thinks this, but I also know that this is going to come down to mom and dad. And, you really need to kind of push him to the side a little bit, and not to alienate the uncle, but also have the discussion with the uncle and say, listen, you're extremely important in this process as well, but that's not your kid. Let's let them decide. And if they decide to come here, we're going to include the entire family. Like, there's an honesty that comes with that, whereas other coaches would be like, let's try to make everybody happy, and you can do that. And some coaches, Urban Meyer is the greatest recruiter I've ever, experienced in college football. Make everybody feel great about it and happy about it. But then when they get there, all of a sudden, it's just not, the foundation isn't there. And sometimes those kids get, disenchanted and they want to transfer. And in this day of the portal, it's extremely important that you keep kids, be honest with them up front and tell them what your vision is for them and have them buy into that. I just think honesty coupled with his engagement with recruits is important.
We're talking with Mike Farrell of MikeFarrellSports.com. Mike, I've been always a little bit curious about how people nationally view Nebraska in terms of their recruiting prowess. You mentioned earlier that, Nebraska is probably not going to consistently get high 4- and 5-star kids, but I do wonder, what is their ceiling in terms of consistently recruiting? If you go to the various services, they have mostly sat in the 15 to 25 range in terms of national rankings, outside of a couple of blips where I think Mike Riley had a year that was higher than that. And obviously Bill Callahan back in the day had a borderline top 5 class. Is 15 to 25 in your mind kind of a general ceiling for where Nebraska can consistently recruit at? Or if they start winning, do you think the ceiling's higher than that?
I don't know. 15 to 25 is great, honestly, because you pencil in, 6 out of the top 10 from the SEC immediately. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is, based on recruiting geography, historical recruiting. Alabama, Georgia, LSU are always going to be up there. Now Texas, they're always up there. So, you eliminate a lot of spots in the top 10. So then that's everybody sort of, battling amongst 7 or 8 teams to finish 15th and 16th and 17th. If you can get there, I think you're in good shape. And you're not going to out-recruit Ohio State. Most years you're not going to out-recruit Penn State and Michigan. But finishing, 4th, 5th in Oregon, you're not going to out-recruit them now either. Finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th in the Big Ten is the recipe to have success in that conference. But to me, it's like, again, if you have a guy who can recruit well, the Marlon Lucky class that everybody remembers, but a guy that can't develop, or, the inflated Riley class with a few of those overrated guys from California that weren't going to be happy there from the beginning and were sort of Keyshawn Johnson guys, it's not going to matter. To me, I don't care about recruiting rankings when it comes to Nebraska. I look at them similar to West Virginia under Rich Rod. Are you getting the right guys? You're winning battles on the road all the time. I know this class has a lot of in-state kids, and I think that's important for Matt Rhule to take care of the in-state kids. You know, you got a couple Dakotas in here, and you got some Missouri, but they need to like win battles in his stomping grounds in the Northeast. They have to win some battles in the Southeast and Texas and California, and do a little bit more of that. But mix it all together like Hurrdat did at West Virginia. Have them fit your scheme. Have them fit what you want out of them, and then become a very dangerous football program that recruits on the road, and then is able to get better players as you have success. Rich Rodriguez was able to get, you know, a Noel Devine or a Steve Slayton, you know, guys like that, that were high-level recruits, and he beat out some big-time programs for him after he started to have some success. So that's what I see for Nebraska. Listen, it's a long trip. People go there, you know, fans go there. I mean, not fans, recruits go there. They get enamored because they're greeted. They're, you know, the atmosphere at the home games is amazing. The atmosphere at the spring game, even spring practice, is amazing. You know, but then, you know, you get home, and it takes a long time to get home, and then you go back for a visit. It takes a long time to get there, and then a long time to get back home, and then you realize it's really cold there in the winter. So many factors that work against you that I think what Rhule does is a good job. He's like not squeezing anybody to get a commitment in July or in June or May. You know, come back, you know, experience the atmosphere, get used to the travel because there is some, you know, and then if you like us, you know, you're gonna be happy. But it's a different approach in Nebraska. You know, you can't fly them in immediately and fly them out back, and it's always been a problem, you know, since recruiting has become national, and I think that's the thing they have to overcome.
What was with Rock contributing and Westfall, that is, and you can still find it up on the site. One of the things I felt like was very interesting because it's polarizing here, not just because of the hate from the past when I was playing in the 90s, but also you know, Adrian Martinez, and a star was getting ready to be born, and then he got hurt against Colorado, and then the next year we go to Boulder, and Coach Frost had put all his eggs into that basket, and Nebraska traveled well to Colorado. Coach Rhule last year saying they didn't really match the energy of being in Boulder. Plenty of ammunition for week 2 to be important. Walk me back through kind of the culture battle you guys set up with the article with Nebraska and Colorado and long-term sustainability. How does that relate to the importance of week 2 for you?
Yeah, I popped it back up at the top of the site, so it's there for anybody who missed it. Well, here's the thing. I mean, culture is extremely important in college football. When you look at Nick Saban and his dynasty, you look at what Kirby Smart's doing, you know, and culture is different. Everybody's saying, obviously, there's all these arrests at Georgia, and Nick Saban had his issues, and, you know, Urban Meyer had his issues at Florida. Culture is not like squeaky clean, amazing students and citizens. It's everybody buying in to make everybody else better. It's battling in practice. It's getting to know your teammate. It's Brock Bowers being in his 3rd year, taking a freshman tight end under his belt and saying, listen, this is how Kirby likes it. This is how the offensive coordinator likes it. This is how we do it here. Colorado will not have that because they won't have guys that have had 3 years into the program. It's all transfer portal, or most of it's transfer portal. And there's not a lot of guys that can tell you how the culture is because there is no culture. What Rhule wants to do with his limited numbers in the portal and with his limited reliance on the portal is build that up so that in 2 years, he's got a Dylan Raiola who's passing the torch on to a younger quarterback who's telling him, this is the way we do things here. This is what time you show up to meetings. It's how you present yourself in an offensive meeting. All of that stuff has to be taught by the players themselves. And when you get that rolling, you have a successful football team. It doesn't mean you're going to win a national championship, but it means you're going to be successful. You're going to be competitive every year, and there's not going to be a big fall off. At Colorado, the danger here, and it's not really a danger because it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I'm sorry. I'm an expert at a lot of things, and people tell me, well, it's never been done before. Yeah. Bill Schneider's the only one who could kind of like rely on mercenaries, which were JUCOs, and actually build a program that had success. And I don't know how he did it, because everybody who in that portal and everybody at junior college has a problem. It's either a problem of playing time, it's homesickness, It's academics, it's off field. Some reason they're leaving, and there's some reason kids were going to JUCO, and he was able to do that. It's very rare. Deion's not that guy that's going to be able to do that. Matt Rhule's not going to rely on that. Mike Norvell did a successful job of it, but he was forced to do so because he came in during COVID. He had no ability to recruit on the road for like a year, and he was a new coach in a new place. So he had to rely on the portal. He got real lucky because he hit a home run on all those kids. Rhule's not doing that. Now, does that mean Nebraska's going to beat Colorado in week 2? I don't know. They didn't win last year. If they don't turn the ball over a billion times, they're going to win the football game. But it's an important game simply because they're in 2 different conferences, but it sets a message. You know, Deion's a fraud if he loses, or Rhule is over his head if he loses. It's a really important game, and probably the most important game of 2 losing programs in the country.
Talking with Mike Farrell of Mike Farrell Sports. Is it almost you mentioned the junior colleges with Bill Snyder? It almost feels like Deion is running Colorado like a JUCO, where basically you're turning your roster over every year. We've got Iowa Western, one of the best JUCOs down the road here in Omaha, just across the river, and like their roster it's almost like a 90% turnover every year. Like it almost seems like that's how Deion's running Colorado.
Yeah, and that's okay if everybody else has to do that. So if you're playing other JUCOs and they've got a 90% turnover rate, then it's fair. But if you're doing that against, programs that aren't doing that and aren't relying upon that, you bring 5 new offensive linemen in and you give them, the spring and the fall, and sometimes some are there in the spring, some are arriving in the fall. They're not going to gel. It's going to be difficult. And that's why we saw 80,000 sacks last year, because they have to have a continuity. You bring a defensive line group in and they're all transfers and they don't know each other and they don't know their strengths. They don't know this stunt versus this stunt, or this guy likes outside leverage. You have to know your teammates and what strengths they play to, and you have to work in conjunction as a unit. If you keep doing that, you're going to start over every year. You can have great skill players, and they do. They've got some good skill players. But it's the trenches that you're going to suffer. And I think that's where you're going to see Colorado fall short.
Let me go national here with you. Stay there, Mike, with Penn State. We had and it's just coincidence, which is part of the reason we wanted you. We went through this exercise before we got to Indy last week about the perception of Penn State and who needed to have a good showing. And once we got back, I said, gosh, I felt like his players most reflected his personality. That's a confident bunch. Last week, we went back and we looked at his recruiting versus the results. And you could easily make the case, Mike, if you go back to 2016, he's outperformed his recruiting clearly. There's some composites that have him in the high teens, low 20s with only one top 6 class since he got to Penn State. You think the perception of him is just that he can't beat Ohio State and Michigan? Or like kind of you're alluding to, hey, be careful here. He wins a lot more games than he probably should. And I know I'm saying that out loud to you Penn State Blue Blood fans.
Well, I mean, so it's careful what you wish for. And Nebraska fans kind of know this pretty well. They got rid of a guy who won 9 games every year. Now he was a bit of an ass. I don't know if I could say that on radio.
That's okay.
But, he was a bit of a problem. I mean, he wasn't a great representative of the university, but the guy won. James Franklin is not that problem. James Franklin is a very professional individual, very articulate, very well spoken, does not lose his stuff. He's got criticism that maybe he, doesn't take enough of the blame upon himself. But I know James Franklin. I've known him for 25 years, probably 30 years. The guy really struggles with the fact that he, is 4-16. I believe it's 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. It kills him, and they've had opportunities and they haven't, pushed through those, but he wins 9-10 games. He should have been in the playoff in 2016, got robbed of that. And that was politics, and politics are going to get worse. We saw what happened at Florida State this year. Even if you move to 12, there's going to be a lot of political shuffling, which is good for teams like Nebraska who are in the Big Ten, because they're going to be get the benefit of the doubt, as is the SEC. But James does a really good job. The problem they have is, they won a national title or they won 2 national titles under Joe Paterno. They almost won one in '94, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska actually won that year, beating Miami, but they were undefeated. Once you get that feeling, and Nebraska fans know this well, nothing but the title is good enough. Again, it's like a drug. You want that. And so that's what Penn State fans want. They just got to be careful. I mean, they could wish their way out of this guy because he could get another job if he wanted to, anytime he wanted to. He's very marketable. But is 10-2 good enough? Is, a non-playoff? Now in 12 teams, it's not good enough. He has to make the playoff consistently. But I don't think he's going to win a national title there. The deck's stacked against him. That's also a difficult recruit. I mean, if you've ever been to State College.
Yeah, it's hard to get to.
You have to take your life into your hands on one of those prop planes getting there, and you could 30-mile-an-hour winds, you get the plane turned around, you'd be like, I'm never coming here again. Or you get dropped there and there's 4 things to do in the entire area, and 3 of them are football related. So that's a tough place to recruit to as well. It's just he's lucky he's got Philly on the east, he's got Pittsburgh on the west. Nebraska doesn't have any of that, but he does a really good job. I think he's a professional coach. Does he do better than expectations? No, because Penn State expectations are probably win 10 games every year or 9 at minimum. I just think he's in a tough situation because everybody wants that national championship, and you got to be careful because the next guy that comes in now, I'll tie this in and scare the hell out of Nebraska fans if you want me to. It could be fun. I love scaring people. There's a guy named Matt Rhule who played at Penn State, who goes 7-5 this year. And James Franklin gets fed up with it all and said, "Listen, I'm tired of winning 10 games here. I'm out, going someplace else." Matt Rhule's dream job is Penn State.
No.
Now, I'm not saying he would leave Nebraska for it, but that's the one place that I would be a little bit scared if I were, a Nebraska fan.
All right, let me get you out of here on this. Something or nothing when you're critiquing the Power 2 conferences at the end of the season, well, you'll take into effect it's coast to coast with such weather variance and time. Will that matter when you evaluate the level of play in the Big Ten Conference?
Yeah, I mean, it will. I mean, obviously, the more you have to travel. I saw UCLA miles they have to travel this season. That's terrible. It's going to be really difficult. It just is, because college football, there's a turnaround. You play on a Saturday and you get back, now you gain the hours back, but that's not overly helpful. And you have to be ready to turn it around the next week. And there's going to be some times where they're going to not go back home. They're going to stay depending on scheduling. That's going to hurt these West Coast teams. They know it. They have no choice. They had to sign up for this, but it's definitely going to hurt them. I think Oregon has the plan for success recruiting wise and the right coach in place to be a national title contender. I don't think Washington does, and I certainly don't think USC is any place close. And UCLA is so far removed from being a playoff contender, it's ridiculous. So Oregon's the one I'd be scared about if I'm a Big Ten team, but the others right now I wouldn't be.
That's Mike Farrell, MikeFarrellSports.com. Mike, we appreciate you making an exception for us to join us on the radio.
Really appreciate it, Mike.
And maybe,
all right, guys.
Maybe we'll catch up after week 2. We'll see what happens.
All right, we'll talk to you.
Thanks.